So welcome to Fireside Chat here at Accelerace. Today I have Jonathan with me, and Jonathan and I are, I'm not saying old friends, but we have been working together for a couple of years ago. And since then, Jonathan, you have kind of built a great insight into both kind of the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also now the driver of a new book coming out in next week called Guru, and looking very much forward to that. Today the subject is basically corporate entrepreneurship, and trying to go a little bit deeper into what can corporates gain from working with startups and how should they basically do it. But I wanted to kick off with a question, and maybe you could start introducing yourself a little bit. But my first question would be, I read an article from you on disruption, and I think that kind of the whole concept of disruption is a great driver for large corporations looking into startups and stuff like that. I myself is a little bit disruption. What is that? And is it as big and fearful as it seems to be in some medias? But maybe we could start up on that. So, but please introduce yourself, Jonathan.
So, I mean, we know each other, so it's also for the viewers.
Exactly.
I'm from the entrepreneurship environment. And just saying this kind of also sets this tone about there's some kind of dilemma in talking about corporate entrepreneurship. Because when you come from the entrepreneurial environment, you've always seen the corporates as sort of these big monsters that you don't want to be like them. You want to be new and cool and innovative. And then you have the corporates that actually are the ones who have all the cash, who have all the staff, who have all the money, who have all the network. Basically, they have what the startups strive to get, but the startups don't want to become like them because then they will lose some of their DNA and their culture. Exactly. So it's a very interesting area, and it also sort of talks into this disruption agenda. I mean, we always hear it's a good learning case. That's why I find it interesting. The Netflix blockbuster case. It's interesting because how can a $10 billion business go bankrupt in 2 years? And how can a startup like Netflix utilize broadband technology in this period to sort of turn them out of business? So what happens? And that's for me, disruption is, first it starts with curiosity. I tend to say that the future belongs to the curious, and that's the case with entrepreneurship, and that's the case with disruption. So I think like the first key learning must be for corporates and startups that they start to listen more and maybe talk a little less.
Okay. But in my mind, kind of disruption, and there's a lot of stories that you have in Netflix, and some calls Airbnb disruption, and some calls Uber disruption. I'm kind of a little bit hesitant and say, well, basically it's smarter way. It's actually broadening the market. It's not disrupting the market, so it's not changing the market, but basically making the market bigger. And then there's probably a lot of industries where you don't say, well, we need milk in the future, we need meat in the future, stuff like that. So those type of companies, are they up for disruption? Maybe not. No one actually knows. But I think that there's also kind of a little bit of a dilemma in actually running this kind of agenda on fear of being kind of disrupted in the market.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, when you study innovation and you're like a nerd, like we are both in this field, you will learn that this burning platform is not the way to go about. If you want to be innovative, you actually need a culture that's where the staff feel safe. So if you use disruption to scare companies, also if I tell you that maybe you'll be out of business in 5 or 10 years, the natural reaction hopefully will be that I'm wrong. And if I try to influence you with fear, very few people might, get so fearful that they will start investigating it. But really, it's not the right mindset. It's more like the curious one, and also the one with possibilities. And I mean, for the corporates, when I'm out, I do a lot of speeches for them and workshops. And when I sort of feel the breakthrough, that is when this CEO, who is maybe from the McKinsey and who has never been in an Accelerace environment, they they start to understand, well, what is the mindset there, and they sort of start also on a personal level to reinvent how they do leadership and how they lead a business, and they get this personal, because it always starts with you and one person. They get this feeling, wow, this is actually maybe even more interesting than what I'm used to do. And what they're normally used to doing is doing lean setups and making everything so efficient. And they have this risk of killing, and you have to remember that, I mean, Nova Investors at Carlsberg, they were all small startups in the beginning, right? Exactly. And then, of course, the interesting thing is, where I know that you guys at Accelerace, you accelerate. That is, how do you actually go about doing this? Because one thing is getting the curiosity, and the second one is, so you're a company with 50, 100 people. How do you actually start doing this? And then maybe I can turn the interview role around and say, what is your experience? How do you go from, it sounds interesting, to, damn, what am I gonna do? It's so overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think that what I kind of find interesting in the market now is that actually that curiosity from both kind of not necessarily large corporations, but basically established corporations. Say, well, there's something out there, and maybe we are missing some opportunities, and now we are starting to build our curiosity, and kind of the startup ecosystem and startups in itself can maybe can be a supplement to whatever we are already doing within our own innovation departments and stuff like that. And in my mind, it's a little bit, I tend to kind of put this upside down and say, well, this is not a question of disruption and stuff like that, but this is more a question of saying, well, for every person that you have internally working on innovation, there's probably 1,000 out there in the world working on similar issues or similar problems and stuff like that. And a great deal of them are actually startups. And you should think more about how do you build a relationship to that basically huge pool of talent out there. Because if you can do that, maybe you can actually get some insights and ideas and stuff like that you can utilize in your company. So it's more, from my point of view, more a question, say, well, how do you build a relationship to all what goes on outside of my company? And how do you do it really, really cheap and efficient?
Yeah, and I think another important point is you mentioned this guru book coming up, and that was sort of me taking my own medicine and saying, so I wrote a book 2 years ago, it went pretty well, I could write a second book. That would always sounds like a good business model, like with the movies. But then when you also do speeches a lot, like I do, you kind of get maybe a little bored of hearing your own voice, and you don't really learn. So I thought, okay, I want to take this journey, I want to reach out to Brian Chesky from Airbnb and Guy Kawasaki and others, like for me, like people who are very inspiring, and ask them to contribute into this agenda. And what I see a lot in those articles that they've written is that maybe the biggest dilemma is that this self-perception that we have within, for instance, I live in Jutland, in Aarhus, and in our area we have so many companies that are actually doing 99% of the export in Denmark. So we don't make a living on the high-profile, fancy, cool tech startups. No. We make a living on people producing some kind of small thing like this iron thing, and they have maybe 200 people working. And they are extremely good at what they do, and they have no idea about all these, buzzwords of disruption and traction and whatever you can use in our lingo. And then on the other side, you have the startups that are the cool ones, the ones in the media. And the big challenge is, how do you make two such different cultures meet? It's almost like comparing to our, big discussions about the different cultures in Denmark and integrating. And how do you make, and it's sort of the same maybe right now. And 10 years ago, we didn't have this volume of startups. Now we have all these new foreigners, and they're different from us, and they think different, and their outlook is global. And how do they start to talk to this guy who is just, he's just, he's jysk, as we say. And if you guys don't know what that means, it means like very much down to earth and very good at selling, but not very like fancy, doesn't like to be in the media. And I've seen a big challenge, when I work with these, and we have a company with 100 people, and I tell them, okay, which technologies do should we find interesting? Maybe he says 3D printing and machine learning because he heard about it and he thinks maybe it's relevant. And then meet this guy, and they have this cool startup, and they're like, first part is sort of mediating, making them understand each other. But if you can do that, I think there's like a big key in taking the two different environments and sort of breaking down this culture barrier. I don't know if you've experienced this yet. They think very differently, but they can learn a lot from each other, but they have to be actually curious and willing to learn. And also the startups have to accept, that these are not, maybe the people we normally talk to.
No, and I totally agree. And as you kind of kicked off and say, well, a startup, just to kind of use the frame of, for example, Steve Blank, is basically a temporary organization searching for a business model, whereas a kind of an established company is executing on a business model. But basically, both need those two things. An established companies also need part of their business to be searching for something, and then a startup needs to get to a point where they can execute. So there should be a really common ground for learning. But I totally agree that the culture barrier and kind of the understanding of how do we then do this collaboration in a way that both benefit from, their kind of the models is not yet, as I've seen, really developed. And my fear is, I actually think it's extremely positive that established companies are paying attention to the startup environment and to startup as a whole. But I also fear that this is a little bit like corporate venturing in the late 80s. A lot of companies did it, lost a lot of money, and now a lot of them are not doing it anymore. So maybe this is just, this is hype, and in 3 years, then we are back to normal. and I actually also think from kind of the whole ecosystem perspective, it's actually really good that you have this kind of relationship between corporates and startups. So I'm trying constantly to figure out, what is the model for or the models probably for both, for providing value both to the startup but also to the established corporations. And in my mind, we haven't figured that out yet. And therefore, there's a big chance that, in a short period of time, no one is doing this more because, you cannot argue, we got this, or no one understands what was actually the value we got out of that. Is that also kind of your experience, or?
Yeah, I mean it's, for me, it's very much when I work with the corporates, and that can be a company of 50 or 5,000. It's making it very concrete.
Exactly.
And like when I mentioned Lean Startup, they have not heard about it. We start educating them, and then they're like, so where do we go? Key learning number one in Lean Startups: get out of the building. So we start up setting meetings with people they don't normally meet. And then I usually compare what happens to when a little girl is on the train with her mom from Copenhagen to Aarhus, and they see the same nature passing by, and the buildings and the houses and the horses, and the mom is she's biased because she's seen it all before, so she doesn't hardly register what's going on, and the girl is like children are curious, asking questions about why is the world like this, and why did we choose to create it like that. Of course, not in philosophical terms. She's a child, but she asked this. And then I've experienced when the CEO or the corporate starts thinking a bit more like the child, because they meet up with new people that give them a new perspective. That's sort of where it has to start. And the second part is then, how do you go from strategy to culture? Because I've met so many corporates that have an innovation strategy. And if it's the big ones, they have it written down and the CEO loves it. And the board has said, yes, it looks good. And the mid-managers have also nodded because they have to read it. And then the 100 people left know it's on the intranet. It's out there somewhere, but they don't want to pay attention. It's too boring. And then there is the culture. And there is this Peter Drucker saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that is sort of where they have to go. But I don't think you can say you have one model. But I mean, culture could be like you guys do accelerators and incubators, where you take it out of your existing corporate system. But it can also be, how do you, integrate startups into what you already do? And maybe it's, for some people, maybe it's just like this blood transfusion where you get a bit entrepreneurial blood into your DNA, and that's enough. I mean, I don't think, like you said in the beginning, that all companies are going to be totally disrupted. I think this, when I hear people saying disrupt or die, I hear consultants saying book me so I can scare you and maybe I can sell you another workshop.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's their business model, to scare and then to sell.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you cannot just lean back. I think it's from the football world, Rasmus Ankersen from FC Midtjylland, he's written this book, Being Hungry in Paradise.
Yeah.
And that's a good metaphor. The ones that are in most danger are the ones that are doing really well right now, because then you can go back to the blockbuster Netflix. Blockbuster doing extremely well, and with disruption it happens gradually and suddenly. So it takes some years where actually, it's going quite okay. We're losing a bit market, but we're strong on our existing, and then suddenly, if technology supports what these startups are doing, it will happen very quickly. So you sort of have to, I use this term that you have to be, in Danish, forandringsskabende rather than forandringsparat. It sort of means that it's not enough to be ready for change. You have to create it every day. And that is what, like when you say what is a startup, it's a business model being created every day. And a corporate is not. That is a company optimizing what they do every day. So you have to have a foot in both in both fields.
And kind of my perspective is also that when corporates are engaging with startups, it's basically in order to learn. And I actually think there's a real good kind of learning opportunity that is more actual and more action oriented than going to an MBA or a conference and stuff like that, because you can see stuff in the making. So you can learn both kind of what kind of new things and technologies, what are the trends by actually watching them. You can learn, as you're saying, the process and the method. So how are these guys actually doing a lot of things for a minimum of resources. You can also kind of see it from a opportunity. So if you are playing Lotto or some other game, well, you don't just buy one number, you buy a series of number, because that doesn't necessarily increase your chance of success, or at least your perception of success. And it's the same way. You have to build relationship to different types of startups in order to actually get that insight. But it could be extremely actionable insights that you get from working with startup. So the ones that actually go into this for looking for the next big thing, well, we are looking for our Netflix or whatever. Yeah, maybe happening, but then you should be a venture capitalist. But if you are looking for kind of the learning and understanding how is the market going, what is kind of the technology trends, and what is kind of the methods and ideas and stuff that you can use in a large corporation, then you may be on the right track, because then you are actually part of changing your culture and not just looking for whatever new thing, because that is basically random if you run into that or not.
Yeah, and I mean with the disruptive innovation, which is like kind of the term that kicked off this whole disruption agenda, that Clayton Christensen, that was also just, I mean, the key learning for me was that there are a lot of companies who are focusing on their existing customers and doing everything for them, meaning that there are a lot they are not interested about.
Yeah.
I mean, in the insurance industry, which is, of course, on one hand, regulated, so much from EU that it's not just going to happen like this, but on the other hand, so many people that they don't want to help with an insurance. And it's sort of, if there are a lot of people out there that nobody helps, there has to be a problem that's not yet solved. And you can go two ways. You can say, no, we don't want them, and let's, I think a lot of companies, the big ones, are also doing a lot of lobbyism for sort of trying to keep the law as it is, because then they can keep out these guys. And then there are some of these, and that's where disrupting as the sort of more negative term can be applied. I mean, Uber is not like a disruptive innovation, but it's disruptive in the sense that they don't care about the law. Then they pay their drivers to drive illegally. They're sort of using the Napster mindset, We cannot share music illegally. And Sean Parker said, well, I don't really care, and go ahead and sue me. And people can well, he didn't make a business on it, but he changed the music industry forever.
Exactly.
I don't know if it will happen in banking and others, but I mean, if maybe we will see a startup saying, well, I'll make a company structure so they can't sue me personally, and then I really don't care about the rest, because that is also like when we talk about 3D print in China, you can 3D print a house, and instantly you will think, wow, that is scary for the building companies here. But on the other hand, we live in a very regulated society where there are so many rules when you build a house. So it's not like because I can turn a printer on and print a house out here that I can actually do it, because then I will be confronted with all the requirements. And that is, and actually it may be a good example of a tech company in Shenzhen in China who can actually make this printer, and Danish people don't understand how can you do that, and they will not accept until I show them the video and say, well, actually you can build it in like 42 days, you can print this very nice looking house. And they're like, whoa. And then on the other hand, this Chinese company will never get into Denmark because they will never understand local regulation. But if these kind of companies meet and they don't have to merge, they can just partner instead of compete, then you can find the new business models. That's how I actually think a lot of SMVs, they should think more in terms of not seeing these people as competitors but as collaborators. And they have knowledge about what is going on, and they can support them. Because I've built a couple of international startups, and one of the most difficult things when you go international is actually not understanding the culture and the consumers, it's understanding the legal stuff. And what you cannot do, it's very hard, just to, and even if you have a local partner that knows all this, you would actually love to maybe work with them.
Exactly.
And maybe startups will not, for me as an entrepreneur, I would not like the idea of a corporate buying me. And I think maybe many successful startups are, if they are not exit-minded, they will not want to go this way. But that doesn't mean that you cannot work together. Doesn't mean that the corporate cannot benefit from all the learning.
Exactly. And in my mind, kind of, it's also when you think about this as not as competitors, but basically as partners, then you as a corporate is basically broadening your market for one thing, but also you're keeping the risk down, because should we invest or should we do whatever? No, but through the partnership you figure out, well, this is your life due diligence process, basically. Does this work or not? And of course we invest our resources and stuff into that, depending on what do we expect.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point with risk management, because I mean, it's so difficult when people use Google as a learning case. I mean, no Scandinavian companies come close to Google financially or talent-wise. So you cannot see, so what are Google doing? They're just buying, if a guy quits their job at Google, starts a new one, Google just say, whoa, we want them, and they buy them. We cannot do this. We don't have the money and we don't have the brand. So it's more like thinking, what are we actually learning from them? We are learning that when you lose talent, and if you don't have all the talent in the world, so you have to have the talent close in order to learn from them. So like you're saying, well, maybe you should just start building your own little ecosystem of startups within different industries, and then you will be really good, Maybe if you have an office building, like now we are in Symbion with a lot of tech startups, maybe you should be closer to these. There's also like this geographical often distance that the old school companies are out there on a field, some strange place, isolated, and then we have the tech hubs, and even the distance makes it hard because people don't take this drive.
So kind of to also finish it up a little bit, as kind of hear you say, well, there's not one model, there are several models, but they have to kind of be built around, well, we want to learn something new. We actually want to build our curiosity machine again, as we were when we were young companies, as an established company, and it's more a partner strategy than it's buying or investing and stuff like that. And that partner strategy could actually be part of your life due diligence, so you get an insight into what actually works and what doesn't work, and you try to use that, utilize that. So it's basically, well, build your options broader, and the more options that you have for of course a limited cost, the better you are off in the long run.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure to having you here, and we are looking forward to next week when your new book is coming out. So hopefully that would be a great success as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.